All right, yeah. So we are going to get started with introductions now. Just waiting on the last two candidates to join us, but obviously they can introduce themselves as soon as they log on. But yeah, so welcome to our conversation with the 2021 Boston mayoral candidates. So good to have all of you, our attendees as well as our candidates. Just thank you all for joining us. So my name is Alex Jarecki. I'm a student at Northeastern University on co-op with Little Brothers Friends of the Elderly. Sofia and I are the intergenerational program coordinators. Sofia, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi everyone, I'm Sofia Corbett. I'm the other Northeastern co-op and also currently working with Little Brothers.
Thank you, Sofia. And just before we get started with the candidates, I'd like to invite our executive director, Nikki Schultz, to give a bit of an introduction about what Little Brothers is all about.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks to everyone who's joining us. Special thank you to Alex and Sofia, who've worked so hard to get everyone together today, and especially to the mayoral candidates and their teams for coordinating with us. We're very excited to have you here and speaking to the older adults in our program. It means a lot to see you all. And on a personal note, we all have met. I'm sure you don't remember. I'm on the Spark Council, so John Barros, you did a chief chat with us last year, which I really enjoyed. Councillor Campbell, I've attended your Civic Leader Summit at the Kennedy Center. Councillor Essaibi George, I am also a yarn enthusiast, and Councillor Wu, I live in Rosendale and you get us ice cream. So nice to see you all. Thank you for serving our city. And we're really looking forward to hearing from you today. And again, thank you everyone who's joined us. LBFE, we're a nonprofit in Boston. We've been here for over 40 years. Our mission is to relieve isolation and loneliness. And we do that through intergenerational programs. So students like Alex and Sofia, they join us for a semester or for a year and provide weekly social activities in senior housing buildings and senior centers across the city. So currently we're doing that virtual, but we're very excited to start seeing our friends again really soon.
Thank you, Nikki. As Nikki mentioned, all of the questions today will be focused on older adults and the issues facing older adults, and we hope that our audience can learn more from each of you, the candidates, and your position. So each candidate will have a minute to introduce themselves, and then we will go into our questions, during which each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. We ask that you please respect our time constraints since we do have limited time today. For the minute to answer, I will have my timer, and I would like to welcome Councillor Wu to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. I am coming from a hearing in City Hall, and so apologies if I'm bumping around a little bit. We'll be stable very soon. I'm really grateful for the chance and didn't want to miss out on the opportunity to be in this forum to make sure that we can speak directly to our residents and our seniors in Boston. I am someone who has served the city now. I've had the deep privilege to be a city councilor for 8 years now, a decade in City Hall, first working for Mayor Menino and then now on the council. I come to government with a strong understanding of the barriers that our families face. As a mom of 2 boys who will be in the Boston Public Schools, and as someone who raised my sisters through BPS as well when my mom was struggling with mental illness. I'm the daughter of immigrants, and I know every day that our neighborhoods have been built by all our residents from various backgrounds over many, many years. And in this moment of housing instability, food access, coming out of the pandemic, we need to make sure that we're centering residents and doing all we can at the city level to fight for our communities and keep our residents in Boston. I'm very grateful to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I would like to call on Councillor Campbell for your introduction, please.
Thank you to Little Brothers. Thank you, Alex, Sofia, and Nikki, and of course, all of the attendees for being here. Yes, I'm Andrea Campbell. I've had the privilege of serving District 4 on the council for the last 6 years. This is largely Dorchester, Mattapan, where I live with my husband and 2 boys, a little bit of Jamaica Plain and Rosendale. I grew up in the city of Boston. I was born and raised here, grew up in Roxbury in the South End. I'm a Boston Public Schools kid from pre-K to the 12th grade and have been successful by many metrics. The reason I do this work comes out of pain and tragedy. After losing my twin brother, who cycled in and out of the criminal justice system and passed away while in the custody of the Department of Correction, which oversees our prisons, when he was only 29. And the question I asked is, how do two twins born and raised in the city of Boston have such different life outcomes? I have focused on systemic reform for a long time. I have always centered seniors in my work. So look forward to answering your questions on the critical issues that you care about, particularly using this intergenerational lens. So excited to be here for this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sofia, for that clear timer.
Thank you. I would now like to call on Mr. Barros for your introduction.
Thank you, Sofia, and Nikki, for your leadership, Alex, and for the work you guys do. My name is John Barros, as you said, and I am a lifelong resident of Boston, born in Roxbury, now living in Dorchester with my wife and 4 kids. And I've spent my whole life trying to improve the city that I was born in and the neighborhoods that I live in, as a community organizer, helping to improve my neighborhood, the Dudley Street neighborhood, as part of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, where we worked with our seniors, our older adults, where we worked with younger members of our community to make sure that everybody participated. If we're gonna make Boston a better city for all, we're gonna do it because we're gonna work with everyone and we don't miss everyone. And as mayor, I'll make sure that the voices of all of our older adults and all of our younger adults are carried to City Hall, and that we're responsive to that as political leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barros. I would now like to call on Councillor Essaibi George.
Thank you, Sofia, Alex, and Nikki, for welcoming us here today. Boston is my home, where I grew up and am raising my 4 boys, a connection that drives me to work harder and deliver more for the city I love. I believe I am the right leader for this city at this moment. As a small business owner, I know how devastating this pandemic has been on our businesses, large and small, and what it's going to take to help them recover and then grow and thrive. As a former Boston Public Schools teacher, I had a front row seat to the challenges that our families, our kids, our school communities have day in and day out. We need to lift up our students, our educators, close the achievement gap, and make sure every child receives a high quality education. As a city councilor at large, I'm proud to represent the entire city. And while I'm proud of my legislative accomplishments in housing and homelessness, mental health, recovery, and education, I'm most proud of my presence in all of our neighborhoods. I show up, and I'll show up for our aging residents, meet you where you are, and look forward to this conversation with you here today.
Thank you. And I would also like to welcome Representative Jon Santiago, who is now joining us. I ask that you just give a minute introduction, and thank you. I'm glad you were able to log on.
Great. No, thank you. And I appreciate the flexibility. We're doing some business at the State House right now, so just was back and forth there, but I appreciate the flexibility. Thank you to everyone who's put together this important forum. This is an issue that is of supreme importance to me as someone who cares for seniors and some of the most vulnerable residents on the front lines as an ER doctor at Boston Medical Center. You know, when I think about the seniors, I think about their right to remain in their communities safely, you know, close to their families, their friends, and their neighbors. But as you know, many of our seniors are facing some difficulties. You know, we have rising property taxes, we have a cost of living that is exuberant, we have expensive healthcare, and those are all forcing our seniors, you know, out of their communities. And I think what I just recently found out is that 3 out of 4 elderly and people living alone in Boston don't have enough money to pay for their own expenses. You know, that's unacceptable, and that's why I'm running for mayor. You know, and I've been a staunch supporter of senior issues as a state house representative, you know, voting to increase the number of programs and line items with respect to supportive housing, community choices, and even the prescription advantage program, which we raised by several $1 million.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Representative. I would now like to turn it over to Alex to start us off with our first question.
Yes, thank you, candidates, for those introductions. It's good to get to know you a little bit better, and hopefully these questions help us to get to know you even more. So as Representative Santiago and several of you alluded to in your introductions, Boston property values have increased over the past few decades and are likely going to continue to increase. This obviously places a burden on all Boston residents, but especially our older adults in Boston, many of whom bought their homes decades ago and would really like to remain where they are. So our first question this morning is, how will you ensure that senior residents do not face an undue burden when it comes to affordable and secure housing? Each of you will have 2 minutes to answer, and I would like to call on Mr. Barros to answer first. Oh, you're muted.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for the question. And yeah, you're right. 40% of our seniors are housing cost burden. And affordable housing is something that has created a lot of pressure for our older adults. It's created a lot of pressures for our families. And so it's really important that we make this a priority. As mayor, I'll make sure that we address, the fact that our taxes increase, the valuation increases time to time. And when it does that for people who are on fixed income, you can't plan for it. And many times it displaces you, or it forces you to dramatically change where you're living because you can no longer afford it. I'll make sure that the city is aggressive in the tax exemptions that we provide to seniors, and that we're doing it ahead of time, not after the fact, that we are working out the situations to create a parallel exemption track every time we understand that valuation is going up. The second thing is we need to be very clear to the federal government. I think we can work with the Biden administration that we need to bring our senior housing subsidies back. The subsidies have dried up, and we haven't been building senior affordable living in the city of Boston. We're building too few housing for our seniors, and we need to be more aggressive in making sure that the CPA money that we have available, the Community Preservation Act money that we have available, housing subsidy money that we have available locally is going more towards senior housing, and that the federal government is supporting more senior housing in the city of Boston. Let's bring all our tools to try to fix this problem and address this to make sure that seniors are able to stay in our city, able to stay in their homes, and don't have to get pushed out.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to call on Councillor Wu to answer.
Thank you so much. This is year after year, the stressor that so many of my constituents have been raising, that as folks who have built our neighborhoods and been in communities and created safety and opportunity in each block by block, as they have aged in place, the property values have gone up so much that taxes alone threaten to displace our residents. That, on top of that, the constant calls from developers trying to ask for sales to be able to take advantage of that. On top of that, the rising costs of transportation and the thresholds that we set for the maximum that you can earn back through the write-off through the senior tax write-off work-off program. We need to make sure that we are centering housing stability. And so that is putting more skin in the game from the city. I have committed to ensuring that with this once in a generation opportunity we have with federal funds coming from the Recovery American Rescue Act, that we will be dedicating $200 million of that for housing stability. That's to keep people in their homes, that's to increase home ownership, and to make sure that our seniors who are living in the homes that they have helped create, in the neighborhoods and communities that they've helped create, can stay there. I also want to ensure that what we've learned from surveying seniors across Boston is implemented as well. That to stay in place, we need to make sure that there's transportation that's reliable and safe, to ensure that there are meals programs that deliver meals or create opportunities for seniors to come together to ease the other types of costs that folks are dealing with too. And then last but certainly not least, to make sure that we are taking advantage of all that seniors have to offer with plugging in and incorporating your expertise and your mentorship to create intergenerational benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wu. Next, I'd like to call on Councillor Campbell.
Thank you for the question. These are issues I've been working on since being a district councilor. I have a large number of seniors in my district, which is largely Mattapan, Dorchester, Jamaica Plain, and Rosendale. And what we have seen is that these issues, of course, exist across the entire city of Boston. Housing, affordability, displacement, fears around eviction, and of course, fears around tax increases. And I've been blessed to actually hire what I call my senior ambassador. I've hired a resident who's been in my office since I got to the council and lived in Dorchester for the last 40 years on these issues, centering seniors in my response. Number one is eviction. There are a lot of seniors right now who are in fear of being evicted. And so I would push for the eviction moratorium to stay in place and push for federal dollars and other resources to be made available to these seniors so that they can stay in their homes in the midst of this pandemic. The second is, of course, on property taxes. I have been a part of various council conversations, including with Councillor Flynn and Councillor Bach on these very issues, pushing for tax deferrals, pushing for an expansion of the exemption so that our seniors do not feel the burden of these property tax increases on their backs. And there's a way with this infusion of federal dollars to make sure that that happens. The third piece is creating more affordable housing opportunities. My first piece of legislation on the council was a Community Preservation Act. It's generating millions of dollars every year for affordable housing. I started the Vacant Lot Initiative, and we're actually activating some of these lots for intergenerational housing opportunities right now. These are things I would absolutely continue if I was blessed to become the next elected mayor. And then lastly, the Senior Repair Program. All the programs that are designed to help seniors stay in their homes, making sure that they are operated with the greatest standards of excellence and accountability so that they're effective in making sure our residents are kept in their homes. And most importantly, making sure that these programs are available to our seniors, regardless of age. Sometimes some seniors who are just.
Thank you. I think we might have lost connection there for a moment, but thank you, Councillor Campbell. Next, I'd like to call on Representative Santiago.
Great. Well, thank you for the question. When it comes to affordable housing in the city and in my neighborhood, without a doubt, our elderly folks bear the brunt of the housing crunch. You know, those on fixed incomes, can no longer stay in their homes and in the neighborhoods that they helped create. And this is especially true in many of our Black and Latino communities who are disproportionately impacted. So as mayor, I'm dead set on focusing on aging in place strategies. And one of those strategies for me is transparency and relief from property taxes. I'm committed to increasing transparency and providing tax relief by doing a couple of things. I think establishing clear and transparent assessment criteria is what we need first and foremost. I'm going to work with legislators on Beacon Hill to make sure that we can extend that property tax assessment, from a period of 30 to 90 days, and I'm looking forward to increasing the residential exemption that we give seniors over 65. Again, they help create the fabric of these communities. They need to stay there, and we need to be supporting them. But this isn't just about property taxes. It's about our housing paradigm. And it needs to be shifted. I'm committed to making sure that we can protect, preserve, and expand really affordable housing throughout the city of Boston, particularly through supporting some of our CDCs and our community land trusts. And I'm looking forward to doing that as the next mayor of Boston.
Right, thank you so much, Representative Santiago. And lastly, Councillor Essaibi George.
Right now, we know that Boston's residents are struggling to pay rent. Our families can't find or afford stable housing, and too many individuals, too many families, too many older residents and children are experiencing chronic homelessness. This past year has only emphasized these realities, and the effects will last long after the pandemic has passed. Our housing stock must be reflective of the needs of those who call this city home. That's why I've called for a hearing earlier this year on our city's existing residential unit diversity, so we can understand what units we have in the marketplace and what units we need to equitably house our residents and more proactively shape our inclusive and thriving city. We need to see what's out there and then act accordingly. And we need to plan and build for the realities of our residents. More must be done to encourage the creation of more senior-specific housing and to ensure that those who have made Boston their home can stay here. We must support our seniors to help them age in the community that they call home by creating more secure and accessible affordable housing options, including housing for older residents who identify as LGBTQIA. We've talked a lot about that over this last week in particular, and our older residents who have significant disabilities and need accessible units. It's also important for us to explore, and we've done that on the council, explore opportunities to lower property taxes. I've held meetings across all of our neighborhoods and have consistently heard how property taxes in our city have become a greater burden, especially for our seniors who are on limited, often limited and fixed incomes. We need to do this also in partnership with our older residents, older Bostonians, to make sure that we are truly being responsive to their needs. When we think about the voices at the table, those that are most impacted, our older Bostonians are part of that for sure.
Thank you so much for all of those answers from all of you. And I'll turn it over to Sophia for our next question in our housing category.
Thank you. Our next question begins, following the heat wave last week, some older adults were concerned about heating and cooling in senior housing in the city. Currently, the Massachusetts Housing Code does not require building owners to provide air conditioning during the warm months. What could and would you do as mayor to ensure that Boston's older population don't suffer from excessive heat during the summer or uneven heating in the cooler months? And I would like to start with Representative Santiago, if you would like to have the 2 minutes to respond.
Great. Thank you, Sophia, for the question. I mean, this is an issue that I've been dealing with in my very own district. I represent today one of the highest concentrations of BHA and HUD-owned buildings in the city. It's a very diverse city with race and class and in terms of age as well. And every summer I get a number of calls to my office with respect to the dangerous conditions that you're referring to, particularly as things get hot and we can have heat waves. And I know the deleterious effects that has because I treat some of these folks in the emergency room. So I will tell you as an interim measure, I'm going to work closely with the BHA to provide air conditioning units to any resident, who needs one May through September. I envision having units that will be provided to residents free of charge and installed by building staff to make sure that folks are not at risk of having heat stroke. But this is only temporary fix, because the bigger issue here, from my point of view, is the state of affairs when it comes to BHA buildings. 3 times this past year, my office got a call with respect to some of the elevators that were broken in Torre, which is one of the biggest units here in the South End. I mean, the elevators were down. That's a risk. That's a health risk that really endangered some of our elderly and our disabled residents who couldn't even use the stairs and they were trapped in their buildings. This is unacceptable. As Mayor Boston, I'm committed to doubling down on resources for the BHA to make sure that they have what they need to support some of our most frail, elderly people in the city of Boston.
Thank you very much. And I see that Andrea Campbell is returned to the call. I'll just quickly repeat the question for you. Following the heat wave last week, some older adults were concerned about heating and cooling in senior housing in the city. Currently, the Massachusetts Housing Code does not require building owners to provide air conditioning during the warm months. What could you, as mayor, do to ensure that Boston's older populations don't suffer from excessive heat during the summer or uneven heating in cooler months? Thank you. And then I would like to call on Councillor Essaibi George to go respond next. Thank you.
Great. Oh, I've been trying to do my own timer too, but I'll use yours. We need to consistently make sure that we are conducting outreach to our aging residents and visit to our senior housing developments, as well as making sure that we are outreaching to our older Bostonians who are living independently, living on their own. We need to make sure that anyone who needs help, especially our older residents, get the information and the resources and access to the supports that they need. We need to make sure and work very urgently to make sure that older Bostonians are connected to the city and that they're connected not just to our senior commission, our elderly commission, but that they're connected to all of our city's departments. We need to make sure that we are creating strong bonds of communication and open lines of communication so that we can respond to the needs of our older residents, especially those who are too often living in isolation. I think it's certainly worth our effort, our investment to explore a city voucher program that would allow for older Bostonians to buy air conditioning units. That way you have access to them, and we as a city perhaps could organize days in late spring or early summer to deliver those vouchers and or those air conditioning units, because we certainly know that many of our older Bostonians may not be able to install them themselves. We can do that in partnership, and I think through those efforts, find ways to build, I think, stronger community bonds. I think we have a real opportunity to tear down those barriers to other resources as well. The city must conduct and continuously conduct thorough outreach to our older Bostonians to ensure that they have access to all of the things that they need, whether it's air conditioning, whether it's heating units, whether it's access to transportation, the internet, healthcare, or our libraries. All of our city services should be accessible to our older Bostonians, regardless of where they live across our city.
Thank you, Councillor. I would like to call on Mr. Barros to respond next. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. This is a big problem. As we know, we will be seeing more heat waves. We will see higher temperatures. We will see more days with 90+ degrees. And this is already a big challenge for many of my neighbors here and many people who don't have ACs available or don't have HVAC systems. The first thing I would do would be to improve the city's existing programs. Our senior home repair program doesn't allow you just to add cooling unless you're doing both heating and cooling. And then they actually, for the seniors that I've talked to, they discourage HVAC system and only try to cover for heating. We've got to expand what we're covering at the City of Boston. Cooling is not a luxury. Cooling is a matter of health and safety, and we've got to do a better job. So that's the first thing I will do. The second thing is we need to create, I know typically in the past when there've been heat waves, we've tried to move our older adults to cooling centers, different places in the city where they can go. Some of them are senior centers, some of them are community centers. We need to make sure that more people know that they're available and make it easier to move people back and forth if in fact we don't have more immediate resources. And then on the long term, as we try to improve Boston's housing and buildings to be more climate resilient, we need to make sure that there's financing and there's process for people to retrofit their entire homes with better installation, with better cooling system, to make sure that it's more energy efficient and that people can have a better quality of life in their homes. We need to make sure that these programs are easy to use and are seamless, because many of the seniors that I've talked to complain about project managing these kinds of projects, and we need to make sure that they have advocates to help them do it.
Thank you very much for your answer. I would like to call on Councillor Wu next to respond. Thank you.
Thank you. As has been mentioned, Boston's getting hotter. We know that we're currently projected to triple the number of days over 90 degrees. Basically, the entire summer in a couple decades is going to be too hot to safely work outside or to be without cooling and infrastructure in your home. I was just at a BHA property yesterday speaking with staff about this very matter, the concern and the anxiety that we have for seniors who are very early on in the summer worrying about this. The same concern that we have for sending our students to school in buildings that are very old and not climate and temperature controlled. And so we need to ensure that the spaces that we already have, the cooling centers that are already available that haven't been used as much, particularly when we already have spaces in many senior buildings, that the communication and the information is out there. Social infrastructure makes a big, big difference. Are we in contact? Are we connected to every single senior so people know what the options are right now, this very summer, as it's going to happen again and again? And then as we think about how to change this so that we don't have to worry and get people out of their homes into cooling centers, how do we ensure that every single home has the infrastructure that it needs? When we talk about the type of housing that we need to be building in the city, whether that's housing integrated to public buildings like on top of libraries and municipal community centers and parking lots, or giving people the resources to do this in their own private homes, if we are insulating homes to the degree that they should be, if we are retrofitting and updating these homes, it not only protects you and keeps you healthier and safer, and you don't have to worry about the temperature fluctuations, but it also saves you money when you don't have to be paying for the utilities, and we won't be increasing the emissions from air conditioning and all of that. So this is really one conversation about buildings across the city. We're going to put the resources to make it happen.
Thank you, Councillor, for your answer. I would now like to call on Councillor Campbell to respond to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Hopefully I don't cut out. The first thing I would work on is the digital divide in the city of Boston. Clearly, as a resident of Mattapan, I'm having some Wi-Fi issues, so my apologies for freezing earlier. So I have to stay off video for a little bit. Hopefully I'll be able to come back on, but still, of course, want to fully participate. This is an issue that I've been working on for some time. I have a lot of current BHA properties in my district and have been frustrated over the years at the lack of investment into these properties. And I'll give you one example. It speaks to the stark inequity that exists in the city of Boston. I have Franklin Field and Franklin South in my district. These are properties that have not been renovated or touched in 30 years, which is absolutely unacceptable in the city of Boston. So over the years, I, along with Rep Holmes and many others, have gone around giving away ACs, making sure that folks have immediate solutions to the rising heat we're seeing in the city of Boston and the effect that has on their health and their wellness for them and their families. Long-term, if I'm blessed to become the next elected mayor, and I put this into some of my policy, particularly around the environment, I would absolutely expand the senior repair program to make sure that it also covers these types of issues, which it currently does not. I would absolutely make greater investments in Boston Housing Authority, and not the temporary solutions around ACs, HVAC systems, but renovating these buildings and properties that have not been renovated in a long time, retrofitting them, ensuring that every resident has access to electric appliances and all the things they would need. I would also make and expand grant programs in the city of Boston for small landlords, as well as tenants, so they have access to resources to retrofit their homes, improve insulation, have access to electric appliances, all the things that many of us on the Zoom probably take for granted. And there are resources at the federal level and the state level to allow for this. And I had more in my previous question, but got cut off, so I'll add that at some later point. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you were able to get back on. Thank you everyone for your response. I'll turn it over to Alex for our next question.
Great. So this is just a quick in-between question. I think it could just be a quick show of hands, whether that's your physical hand or a Zoom hand. A resident from Peabody Englewood asked in the chat which of the candidates could make a commitment to visit all BHA senior housing at least once a year, not just around voting time. So if we could just have a show of hands of candidates who would be willing to visit all of the BHA housing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And then to get into our next question. So the COVID-19 pandemic has led to an emphasis on internet access for all people. Many people found themselves unexpectedly isolated during the pandemic if they lacked access to Zoom or email. So throughout and following the city's recovery from the pandemic, how can we ensure that everyone, and specifically older adults, maintain or are able to gain access to devices and to the internet? So I'd like to call on Councillor Campbell to go first.
Very appropriate. I'm going to go off video again, just in case I freeze. But it's very appropriate. We know that right now there are, of course, neighborhoods in the city of Boston that don't have access to the Wi-Fi and connectivity they need, not only to just stay connected to relatives and families, but also for telehealth appointments, for medical appointments, for mental health appointments, for job opportunities. It's going to be critically important that we close this digital divide and the inequities that exist. I have done work over the years to make sure that organizations, for example, that provide the technology, the software, and the technical assistance to help our residents learn how to use these various platforms are resourced. Tech Goes Home is one example of that, but there are many programs. I would absolutely make sure that they have the resources and grants to be able to expand upon this work. The federal dollars that we're getting in the millions are one such revenue source that we could use. The second is making sure that when you think about buildings where our seniors are, we have a lot of senior buildings, whether they're BHA or other types of properties. These are buildings where we could actually go into, not only to make sure, of course, that they have connectivity, but they have computer labs and places to go. Someone mentioned Peabody, someone mentioned some other senior buildings in BHA. I fought for years as a district councilor to make sure that Wi-Fi was free for our seniors. I would expand upon that in pushing, of course, for these facilities in homes to also have the computer labs or other places for residents to go right in their building to have access. In addition to that, there is a way in which the city of Boston can be better in making sure that we have the human capital and the outreach to do this type of, to do outreach to make sure that residents, particularly those who don't speak English as a first language, also know about the programs and resources available to them. It's an issue I've led on and will continue to. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Next, I will call on Counselor Essaibi George.
Thanks for the question. You know, we all know that this pandemic has only made the digital divide more apparent, whether it's for our older Bostonians or for our students across our school system. When we think about how critical the internet access has been over this last year and a half, not just to contact family or friends, but to get information, to participate in telehealth, to sign up to get vaccinated or to get tested, order groceries, we know that the internet has played such an important and critical role keeping us connected to one another and to the things that we need over this last year and a half. That being said, we know that way too many residents have not had access to the internet, and we see through Councilor Campbell's experience today, when it is unsteady and unreliable, it creates greater disconnection between us and the things that we are in the midst of. We need to make sure that we are looking into the municipal broadband network. We need to build up our digital equity fund. We need to expand our wicked free Wi-Fi services across the city of Boston. I think we should also come up with a computer literacy program for our aging residents. We saw, especially over this last year and a half, with school-age students who maybe had access to the technology, but parents and families supporting young children didn't have the literacy to help kids engage in their work. The same is true for our older residents, our older Bostonians. If there isn't literacy, it is really hard to use the resources and the tools that you have. We need to make sure that we are teaching older Bostonians the basics and also giving them opportunity to get through the things they need to do. I think as a city, we should also consider some sort of laptop or computer rental program, loaner program, especially for our aging residents, and to do that in partnership with the Boston Public Library, because we know how critical that relationship is between older Bostonians and our library services.
Thank you very much. Next, I will call on Counselor Wu.
Thank you. This has really been exposed during the pandemic, especially, but it has been an issue for years in Boston, as how we've been able to connect our residents to the internet has been very uneven in different parts of the city. And up until very recently, there were still entire buildings. There was one in Chinatown that was known for not being wired at all to be able to have Wi-Fi and was still relying on cable. We know across Boston, there are 15% of our households that still do not have a home internet subscription. And for our seniors in particular, this is a difference between finding out about and getting access to and signing up for meal delivery and social events and being able to connect with family and friends and neighbors and loved ones. And so this is really critical that we take care of all three pieces of it. One, closing that gap for internet connection and being able to have an affordable way for every single family to plug in. Two, ensuring that there's the hardware available, the devices and whether it's laptops and Chromebooks or phones to be able to connect. And then three, really making sure everyone is fluent and has the training that you need to be able to navigate in this world. It's everything from how you see your doctor, to how your kids and grandkids are going to school, to how you can sign up to stay involved in post-retirement, getting plugged in and continuing to be involved in community. And so the other note I want to make is that I put forward a specific plan to close the digital divide. I spent a lot of time talking with our internet providers, with community organizations, and with residents to know just exactly how we get to this place by plugging everyone in, but most of all, making sure that you are connected and supported and accessing everything that this new economy requires with literacy and training and the hands-on support to be able to connect.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Next, I will call on Representative Santiago.
Great. Well, thank you, Alex. As you said, as my colleagues on the phone, on the virtual call have stated today, these inequities have existed long before COVID-19 was here. And what we know is that COVID-19, as in the case of the digital divide and so many other things, they've exposed all these disparities and they've really exacerbated them. and I was proud to be active on a whole host of issues when it came to COVID-19, whether that was doubling my hours in the emergency department, or really serving as part of the speaker's leadership team to really address these inequities. And the digital divide still exists. Our seniors have been left behind, which is not just an issue of whether I can connect to the internet or not. That's how they access telehealth. That's how they access social services. That's how they maintain in contact with family members to keep their mental health, up. And that's why I put forward a plan to address the digital divide. And that really starts with number one, by expanding the municipal broadband, particularly in our most underserved areas. In order for elderly residents to use the internet, they must have connectivity. And that's why, as a State House representatives, I was very proud to co-sponsor a piece of legislation at the State House that would provide free municipal broadband to housing developments in the city of Boston. And so as mayor, I'm going to continue that type of advocacy, and we'll ensure that our lowest income, our most underserved neighborhoods, and communities with the highest density of public housing will be prioritized. But in order to do this, we need a plan, and so that starts off, number one, by mapping out areas in this city, with low coverage, and working with families to figure out what is lacking, connections, devices, or both, or training, That also means, number two, funding programs that can provide access to the internet, including those devices that enable connectivity, to some of our most underserved residents. But we got to get folks connected, and our seniors need to learn how to use the internet. And so as mayor, I'm committed to making sure that, the Age Strong Commission will have the resources and skills to have classes to teach seniors how to navigate technology, which can be a challenging thing. We need to have a curriculum that really focuses on certain techniques or strategies that are more catered to the senior class. And I'm committed to doing that as Mayor of Boston.
Thank you. And then Mr. Barros.
Thank you, Alex. You've heard from my colleagues, this is a very important issue, the digital divide. It existed way before COVID, but COVID then exacerbated. The other thing COVID did is it put more things online. It increased the use of the internet. As chief of economic development for 7 years, I worked very closely with small businesses, in fact, to get them online, to make sure that they can sell their services online. Now you can buy your grocery online. There's so much you can do, but you can't do it unless you can access the internet. There are three things that I would focus on as mayor. Connectivity is one, making sure that all of our buildings, particularly those that we're building new, have internet. Those that are sponsored and affordable housing have to be designed with internet. And then as we do retrofitting for climate resilience, and as we make sure that people have AC and they can stay cool in their homes, we need to connect for the internet. The second thing is, during the pandemic, we made sure that all of our BPS students had computers. If you don't have the hardware, it doesn't matter if you're wired. If your computer's not up to date, it's not going to work for you. We need to make sure that our older adults have quality, updated technology. Like we did during the pandemic for our students, we can work with our companies in the private sector to make sure that all of our seniors have free equipment that they need to connect. And then the last thing is to make sure that everyone has the education and training they need. We can make it fun. It's important because more meetings are going to be online, just like this one. More public hearings are going to be hybrid. And we need to make sure that everybody feels connected and participating and connecting to make sure that they have access. So let's play more games online with our older adults. And little brother does that according to the trivia question that I saw earlier, Alex. Kudos to you guys. We need to do more of that with our older adults, with our younger adults, and make sure people are comfortable.
All right, great. Thank you all so much for your responses. Unfortunately, we are coming very quickly up on our 12 o'clock planned ending time. So we are going to skip to our last question. Once again, you'll all have 2 minutes to respond. So this will be our final question. So in 2014, Boston joined the World Health Organization's network of age-friendly cities. The 2017 Age-Friendly Action Plan outlined steps to improve in 8 domains, which are housing, transportation, outdoor spaces and buildings, community support and health services, civic engagement and employment, social participation, respect and social inclusion, and communication and information. So our final question for each of the candidates is, what does it mean to you to be an age-friendly city? And we will start with Councillor Wu.
Thank you so much. I love this question, and this was such an important endeavor, not only to have the conversation today, but to have really listened and sought the feedback of so many of our seniors across Boston in coming up with the results of that impact report as well. We know that there's greater need for our residents to be plugged in, to be included, to be stabilized, and treasured in every phase of life. And so I think about our city in not a siloed way, but in that our community requires every single one of us, every background, every generation, to be fully engaged and to be able to contribute everything that you are interested in giving to your community in that moment. And so I think a lot about the concept of 80 cities, that when you design a city to work for 8-year-olds and you design it to work for 80-year-olds, whether that is traffic patterns and how safe it is to cross our streets, or how our housing works, or how families can get around and how connected we are to make multi-generational housing possible. That's what I think an age-friendly city is. It's a place that should be leading the way across the country for how we keep our residents in Boston, connect people to all the resources that we have, and make sure that we are building community, not just in times of crisis, as we've seen during the pandemic, but every single day. There should be activities, there should be connectivity through internet, as we've been talking about, through transportation and physically getting to activities, and ensuring that we are all able to enjoy the wisdom, the talent, the history that our human capital has in the city of Boston. And so I'm so grateful to have had some time with you all today. Very respectfully and humbly ask for your vote on September 14th. This is an important moment for the city of Boston, and we need everyone to be part of shaping our collective future. And so very grateful, and looking forward to building on all we've been talking about today.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Thank you so much for joining us today. Next, I would like to call on Mr. Barros.
Thanks, Alex. Really important question. We need to design our city in a way that sees our seniors, in a way that sees our older adults, and then values them through participation, through safe space. But I want to first start with the most important thing we can do, and that's about making sure that our older adults have the medical care and the community-based aging service system that they deserve. I lost my grandmother to COVID this year. And part of that is because we didn't know enough early on in COVID to help protect her. And so she went to the hospital because she wasn't feeling well, and that's what she needed. But how do we provide better information, quicker information? How do we create the kind of community-based services that we need to make sure that people can stay healthy? We are a world-class medical and healthcare ecosystem in Boston, in our city, and we need to make sure that that's working for all of our residents. It also is important then that it's working for us in a way that keeps us healthy through well-being. So making sure that we have stable housing and good quality of life is critical. We've talked about some of the things that matter for our older adults in Boston, like making sure that we have cooling systems in our homes, and making sure that our homes are insulated and that we have what we need there. But Boston's also an older city. Most of our building stock was built way before 1940. So we got to make sure that there's accessibility in our buildings and people can move around. We also, as a chief of economic development for the city, I worked with an innovative program called Go Grandparents, which is working with rideshare programs to move seniors throughout the city. And it was a great program. We need more innovation like that to take care of some of the issues that our older adults have. Think about me for your mayor, John Barros. Please vote for me and check me out at barrosformayor.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. Next, I will call on Councilor Essaibi George.
Thank you, everyone, for having us this afternoon or this morning to talk about these very important issues. As mayor, I will ensure that Boston continues to be an age-friendly city and that we build upon and improve our systems to do so. In our work, we must be intentional about removing barriers to city services, to resources, to supports, and access to care for our aging population. An age-friendly city to me is conducting our work at City Hall with an age-friendly lens, and then doing the work to reach out to our residents and understand what they need from us to improve their quality of life. Because we can't just recover from COVID, we have a responsibility and an opportunity to reimagine, to reengage, and rebuild a more equitable, better Boston for all. And that includes our older Bostonians. To do it right, it's going to take hard work, and I'm ready for that challenge. As your city councilor, I've done that, and as your mayor, I will be present and accessible on the ground in all of our neighborhoods to hear firsthand your stories, your struggles, your successes. I will work to uplift your voice and let your experience inform the work and drive the agenda. And then I will work to bring us together to have the tough but necessary conversations and to better understand each other and collaborate to find real solutions, especially the solutions to the challenges that you face through your experiences as an older Bostonian. It's what I've done as a city council and what I will continue to do as your mayor. I believe that we can build a better Boston, especially for aging residents, but with aging residents at the table to inform the work to improve your quality of life, but to also inform the work to improve the quality of life of your neighbors and those that live across our city. Thank you very much for having all of us today, and I look forward to continued discussion and hope to have your support in this election this fall.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you for joining us. Next, I will call on Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, and I'm going to pray that I don't have to turn off my video. First of all, thank you so much for having us, and thank you to all of the attendees. For me, an age-friendly city is a few things. One is always using an intergenerational lens when doing this work. It is tackling the issues around housing and housing affordability and using that lens to tackle the challenges in transportation and environmental injustices. It is also making sure that our elder voices are reflected in all of our policy decisions at the City of Boston. It's also making sure that we're supporting caregivers and guardians. It's also making sure that we are centering our elders and our seniors in this work. This is what I have done as a district councilor. I have an extensive record of accomplishment, not just saying I will do these things, I have done it. I have a large senior and elder population in my district. They have been at the forefront of my work. I have hired seniors. My senior ambassador, Cheryl Harding, who is in her, well, she's elder, I won't name her age, has been doing this work in partnership with me since I got to the council, pushing all of us on my team to use an intergenerational lens. She's not just my senior ambassador in terms of connecting to seniors, she's also an advisor to me. I would hire our seniors. I'd bring them out of retirement to make them a part of our workforce. I've had senior ambassadors, a group of residents who have informed my policies from the beginning. I have pushed for housing affordability through the passage of the Community Preservation Act, which is generating millions of dollars for senior housing projects. I have activated city-owned vacant lots for senior housing and intergenerational housing. I have pushed for free Wi-Fi and connectivity. All of this is a part of my record of accomplishment and so much more. So I'm asking folks to believe that I'm going to do what I say. And I hope to earn our elders who are on this Zoom their support in this election on September 14th to continue to work in partnership with them. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And Representative Santiago.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Look, Boston has no doubt set a pretty ambitious plan and has made some progress when it comes to making our city an age-friendly one. We've made some incredible improvements. We've installed age-friendly benches on main streets. We've expanded technology to some underserved communities. We've done a good job at publishing COVID-19 information in different languages that are culturally competent. We've even launched, I think, an elder abuse prevention task force. But let's be honest, we have a long way to go and the work remains unfinished. Boston's current livability index, by the AARP is 63. That's a D minus. And as mayor, I am 110% committed to accelerating our progress and getting us to the age-friendly city. And we do that first and foremost by centering the voices of our senior community and having them at the table to do the things that we just discussed in this past hour. That's closing the digital divide, creating affordable housing opportunities and making senior friendly City Hall. But to me, I think age-friendly city, it's much more than just 8 domains. It's about a Boston where our seniors can come together, and age in a place and in their home and in the neighborhoods that they helped create. It's about dignity. It's not just about making sure that our seniors can stay in the city, but I want them to stay in a city that is safe and that has, access to good healthcare and good transportation services. But it's also about our families, and making sure that the families of seniors and their caregivers and their children and their grandchildren can continue to stay and navigate a system to support their loved ones. And so I'm committed to doing that as the next mayor of Boston. It's great to be here. For more information, please see jonsantiago.org. And thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And thank you all so much for those thoughtful responses.
Thank you everyone for your time and your answers. It really has been a pleasure and great to hear from you all. And thank you to our audience for attending. We hope this has been informative. We will now put a list of important dates and links in the chat for registering to vote and voting. Thank you again for your time, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.